Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has called for a face-to-face meeting between himself and Vladimir Putin in an open letter sent to Moscow.
The EU is losing hopes in enforcing a full ban on maritime services for Russian tankers.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has proposed a face-to-face meeting with Vladimir Putin in an open letter to the Russian leader, saying he was ready for a, quote, full ceasefire. The letter marks one of the few times Zelenskyy has appealed directly to Putin since Russia's 2022 full-scale invasion, and the first time he has ever sent a letter directly to the Russian leader. Zelenskyy opened the letter on Thursday saying when Vladimir Putin came to power over 26 years ago, many people in Ukraine viewed Putin positively. But that is now in the past, Zelenskyy said. According to the Ukrainian leader, now the overwhelming majority of Ukrainians view it positively that, quote, our long-range drones paid a visit to the opening of your forum in St. Petersburg, covering a distance of more than 1,000 kilometers. It is not the first time Zelenskyy, who believes only face-to-face talks will yield an agreement on territory, has called for a meeting with Putin. But this time, the Ukrainian presidential office confirmed the letter was sent to Moscow and was shared with Kyiv's partners, including the US. In response to the letter, the Kremlin said on Thursday evening that Zelenskyy is welcome to meet with Putin in Moscow anytime.
A coalition of 9 EU member states plus Iceland and Norway is stepping up pressure to tighten visa conditions for Russian tourists as the summer holiday season approaches. The initiative was led by Sweden with the support of Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, the Netherlands and Poland.
What I want to accomplish is very clear. I want there to be no more shopping weekends. I want there to be no more fancy trips to Europe while Ukrainians are dying on the battlefield.
All 11 countries signed a joint letter highlighting the uneven implementation of the European Commission's guidelines on handling visa applications from Russian nationals. The signatories argue that this fragmentation weakens EU leverage and sends mixed messages about the bloc's resolve towards Russia. The letter also warns that uneven visa practices for Russian tourists may create a security risk across the entire Schengen area. The 11 countries are calling on the EU institutions to introduce new binding visa restrictions and monitor the effective implementation of existing guidelines.
The EU is losing hopes in the chances of enforcing a full ban on maritime services for Russian tankers. The measure was approved in April as part of the 20th package of sanctions to cripple Moscow's war economy. It aims to prohibit all maritime-related services, including banking, shipping, flagging and insurance for tankers carrying Russian oil. Turmoil in energy markets, coupled with persistently high oil prices, have hindered the measure's activation.
Events in the Gulf have clearly changed the calculus about anything to do with energy. For the moment, what all Western economies are struggling with is access to energy at reasonable prices. So I think at this point there is no appetite to take additional measures which might aggravate that situation.
The official reason for the pause was a desire to reach an agreement at the G7 level, but other G7 members haven't shown much enthusiasm in backing the ban.
So in the 20th sanctions package, we did indeed include a legal basis to eventually activate a full maritime services ban. But we were clear that we would do this in consultation and in cooperation with our G7 partners. But we do remain committed to all of the measures that we've put in place, like the oil price cap, and what we can do to minimize revenues that Russia might gain from the situation in Iran.
Additionally, Brussels has not yet secured the support of 2 member states with interests directly at stake, Greece and Malta. The former hosts a powerful shipping industry, while the latter controls Europe's largest ship registry. Speaking from Montenegro, European Council President Antonio Costa called for the EU's enlargement rules to be streamlined by removing the need for unanimity at each stage of the process.
I believe that we don't need to have the unanimity to open chapters and clusters. We just need the unanimity to close chapters and clusters.
Greece and Bulgaria have repeatedly vetoed North Macedonia's EU bid over disputes related to constitutional matters and minority rights. Former Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban routinely used veto powers to block Ukraine's EU integration. Costa also suggested the use of more transitional periods in candidate countries' accession in order to make the process more efficient.
We learned from the previous enlargement process that we always adopted transitional clauses on policies like agriculture, freedom of movement, and so on. And now, because we are talking about a very challenging enlargement, perhaps we need also transitional clauses on institutional matters.
EU and Western Balkans leaders meet in Tivat, Montenegro on Friday. The choice of venue is highly symbolic, as Montenegro could become the 28th EU member state as early as next year.
Protests have continued in Albania against a massive coastal development project linked to Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of US President Donald Trump. Hundreds of demonstrators on Wednesday took to the streets of Tirana for the fourth day to voice their opposition to the project that the government says would be transformational for the former communist nation.
Fillimisht ne protestojmë për ndërhyrjen që është bërë të dalin makineri të lirohet natyra dhe të rikthehet në gjendje më parshme. Por nga ana tjetër projekti I cili është prezantuar dhe sipërfaqja që prezantohet aty është shkatrimtare, nga renda që kemi parë.
The luxury project linked to Kushner's investment firm and Ivanka Trump spans an abandoned island and a nearby stretch of seafront on Albania's southern coast. It has drawn opposition from environmental campaigners and critics of Prime Minister Edi Rama. On Tuesday, Rama said Albania should not be a country that fears an extraordinary project like this one, adding that, quote, there is absolutely no chance that the investment will stop as long as I am here. Supporters and loved ones of Alexei Navalny gathered at his grave on Thursday, the 4th of June, to mark what would have been his 50th birthday. Spontaneous vigils were held in Russia's largest cities in memory of Navalny, a leading opponent of Russian President Vladimir Putin, who died in a prison camp in 2024. His parents were among the attendees.
Сегодня это день памяти Алексея. Потому что сегодня ему было бы 50 лет, но, вы знаете, он был убит 16 февраля 2024 года.
In Moscow, dozens of people, including the parents of his colleague, were also there. In St. Petersburg, people brought flowers to the Zelenskyy stone and the monuments to the victims of political repression. Memorial events were also held in dozens of cities around the world.
Я чувствую такую энергетику от Алексея, что он действительно тот человек, который поднимал людей, сплочал народ, помогал ему, поддерживал его. И все люди это великолепно понимают, и поэтому приходят помянуть его, вспомнить его.
Сегодня я сюда пришел, чтобы почтить память человека в день его 50-летия, к сожалению. Вот уже почти 2,5 года его физически нет с нами, но человек жив до тех пор, пока жива память о нем, о его делах.
One of President Putin's most outspoken opponents, Alexei Navalny, died in prison while serving a sentence on charges his supporters say were fabricated and politically motivated. Investigative journalists later discovered that the politician had been poisoned with a highly toxic substance.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has accused Elon Musk of attempting to whip up division over the murder of teenager Henry Novak in the UK. It comes after a series of posts by Musk on his social media platform X about the murder, many of which have used far-right themes and talking points.
And look, we need to also assert who we are as a country, because Musk again has been interfering in our politics in the last few days, trying to whip up division. That is not who we are in Britain. In Britain, we are reasonable, tolerant people. When we have a terrible case like Henry's case, Henry Novak, we react calmly, as his family have done. When it comes to disgusting images on Grok, we take Grok on and fight, because that's who we are as a country.
Novak was stabbed on his way home from a night out in December by Vikram Digwa, a Sikh man who was found guilty of his murder last month. The incident drew huge public attention after it emerged Digwa had falsely told police who attended the scene that he had been the victim of a racist attack. 2 men have been charged following violent protests over Novak's killing, where hundreds clashed with police in the city of Southampton, also attended by far-right activist Tommy Robinson.
French-Iranian author and illustrator Marjane Satrapi, a leading voice for freedom of expression, has died at the age of 56 in Paris. Satrapi's family said she died of grief just over a year after the death of her husband. Satrapi was best known for the graphic novel Persepolis, as well as its 2007 film adaptation. The story is about Satrapi's early life in Tehran, struggling under the restrictions imposed by Iran's Islamic leadership after the 1979 revolution, before she was sent to Europe by her parents. Despite living in exile, Satrapi remained deeply connected to Iran, using her work to amplify the voices of the Iranian people. Other celebrated works by Satrapi include her graphic novel Chicken with Plums, which she also directed the adaptation of, as well as comedy horror film The Voices starring Ryan Reynolds, and Radioactive, a 2019 biopic of 2-time Nobel Prize winner Marie Curie.